praise team for leading us in a great time of praise and worship this morning. I will say welcome to people I haven't seen your faces in a while. Welcome back. Thank you for choosing to worship with us this morning. And I'm sure that we're blessed by your presence. And I just pray that you will be blessed here this morning as well. As we know from last week, we started a short series through Jonah. Last week we had a great message, I believe, in Jonah, and talked about God's amazing grace being displayed in Jonah's life. Specifically, that grace was displayed on how God did not end Jonah's life because Jonah decided to disobey Him. Instead, God just let Jonah disobey. God let Jonah go and make some choices to really mess up his life. And I said last week that sometimes, that's what God does in our lives. He lets us get way off course. He lets us get so far off course because it takes us getting that far off course before we ever reach the end of our rope. Before we ever get into despair. Before we ever realize disobedience to be sin. You see, God knows that sometimes it takes us reaching that point in our lives on our own before we're ready to return home. Before we're ready to turn back to Him. Kind of like the prodigal son in Luke 15. We all know what happened there because the son went to the father and said, "Dad, I want my half of the inheritance and I want it now." And the father was gracious, and so he gave him his half of the inheritance, and the young man took off and went to a foreign land and spent it all on wild living. He spent every bit of it. As a matter of fact, he ended up broke, and he ended up hungry. This man was a Hebrew. And for Hebrews, pigs and things of that nature, they were unclean animals. But this man ended up working in a foreign land for foreign people, feeding pigs. He was so desperate, he was so hungry that he started desiring to eat what the pigs were eating. And it was only at that point that like a light bulb come on and he's like, I think I made a mistake. I think it's time to go home. And then as Jesus tells the story there in Luke 15, he says that the father didn't chase after the young man, but he gave the impression that the father was looking every day for his son to come home. And then one day, when he saw his son off in the distance coming home, he ran to meet his son. Now, can you imagine what would have happened if maybe 1 or 2 days before that, if the father would have said, "I've had enough. I got to go and find my son and bring him home." Could you imagine if he went and found his son feeding the pigs? What do you think would have happened? The son would have said, "What are you doing? What are you doing here? You're trying to run my life? I have a plan here. Now you're doing what you always do. You're trying to run my life. I told you, I am not a farmer. I'm not going to go home, and I'm not going to live on that farm." And as you're looking around at the pigs that he's feeding, he goes, "Yeah, I'm feeding pigs right now, but this is only temporary until I get up on my feet. I got a plan. Get out of my life. Go home. I'm never going to see you again, and I'm not coming home." Sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes that's the way it is with us. It's not until we come to our senses on our own that we're ready to return home. No one can predict when that time is. Maybe you have a wayward child, but you don't know when that time is right in their life. Maybe you have a wayward friend. You don't know when that time is right in their life, but God knows. And the reason God knows is because God knows us better than we know ourselves. God knows when the time is right in our lives for us to start coming home, and He knows exactly what needs to be done at that particular time to get your attention so that you can start thinking about coming home again. And that's exactly the lesson that Jonah is about to learn. You see, God called Jonah to go to Nineveh. But if you remember from last week, Jonah said, "No, I'm going to Tarshish." God said, "Jonah, go east." And Jonah said, "No, I'm going west." And so Jonah went west, he went down to Joppa, he got on the ship, and he was bound for Tarshish. That's where we left him last week. He was a happy little camper. He went down and went to sleep. He thought maybe he had gotten away with it. He thought maybe he had disobeyed God and gotten away with it. But like I said last week, God was not done with Jonah. And Jonah had not outrun God. You see, God's about to take Jonah's little pleasure cruise and turn it into a teachable moment. Because God knows, in His infinite wisdom, He knows that now is the time to start getting Jonah's attention. Something is right in Jonah's heart. God says, now's the time. And so this morning we're going to see how God prods Jonah, the prodigal son, to start turning toward home again. And the reason I use that word prod, because I want you to think of God getting Jonah's attention like we would do a cow or a sheep. We prod them, right? That's what God does to us. We prod them. And when you prod them with something, it gets their attention, and then they go where you want them to go. They listen to you. And God prods us in our life. And sometimes, like what we're going to see this morning, God prods us with difficult situations to get our attention. Sometimes He even prods us by putting challenging people, like we will see today, in our lives to get our attention. He's not prodding us because He hates us. He's prodding us because He loves us. And He knows that if He can get our attention, or when He gets our attention, not if, when He gets our attention, we're going to go where He wants us to go. We're going to do what He wants us to do because He knows that that's the best thing in life for us, regardless of what we think. And so my prayer for you is this morning, if you feel God has been prodding you, my prayer is that you listen. And you obey, and you start going where God is calling you to go. And start doing those things that God is calling you to do. So turn with me this morning. We're in Jonah, chapter 1, verse 4. Today we're only going to verse 6. And I know it may seem like we're just snail-pacing it through Jonah, but look, Jonah is... chapter 1 is the biggest chapter of the book. And we will start picking up the pace as we go forward. But there are some key things here that we must understand and come to see so that the rest of Jonah will make sense to us. So look at verse 4. I'll read it. And we're going to see how God begins prodding Jonah with a difficult situation to get his attention. Verse 4 says, "But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship, and had lain down and was fast asleep." I'm just going to pause there. Now, since this is a long voyage from Joppa to Tarshish, you can imagine that they're not going to have inexperienced sailors on this trip. They're going to have experienced sailors because they're going to be away from land. So there's only experienced sailors on this ship. These experienced sailors would have seen and went through many storms on the sea before. These experienced sailors would be very familiar with the dangers of sea life. But yet something in this particular storm gets their attention. They know, because of their experience, that this is different. This storm is like nothing they've ever seen before. So let's look at the storm. The text says that God hurled a great wind. And when you look at that word there, hurled, in the original language, I mean, what it gives you is a picture of God hurling the wind like one would do a spear toward a target. So God hurls this wind, and it finds its target, which is the ship. And when it hits its target, it starts generating this massive, savage storm on the sea. And it's that storm that gets these experienced sailors scared, afraid for their lives. The text says that the storm was so bad that the ship was threatening to break apart. Put yourself in their shoes right now. You're on this ship, and it's dark, and it's thundering, and lightning, and the rain is driving, and the wind is driving. And imagine yourself hearing the snapping, and the creaking, and the popping of the wood. As the rain is driving in, you hear the rope straining against the wind. You're getting scared, and the deck, because it's a wooden ship, I imagine the deck is starting to warp, it's starting to buckle, it's tossing to and fro. Man, these sailors, they knew that this was a bad storm. This was not a normal storm. Not for this time of year. That's why they set sail during this time. This was an unexpected storm. The sailors knew it. The sailors knew that this was an unnatural storm. They were right. This was not a natural storm. It was a supernatural storm. This was a storm ordained by God for a specific divine purpose. And that purpose was to not let that ship go any further with Jonah on it. A situation has now been created to get Jonah's attention. But guess what? It gets everybody else's attention on that ship too, doesn't it? And within that little piece right there, here's the truth I want you to take home with you. Sometimes in life, we find ourselves in difficult situations because of the sin of other people. Sometimes other people's poor choices affect our lives. And sometimes other people find themselves in difficult situations because of the sin in our lives. Because of poor decisions that we've made when we've decided to run from God. And I say that because everyone on board this ship is in danger of dying because Jonah decided to run from God. If Jonah would not have run from God, God wouldn't have hurled that wind on the sea. Those sailors would have been sailing smoothly to Tarshish. If Jonah would not have been run from God, those people in Nineveh, they wouldn't be dying without knowing God right now. No, the truth of the matter is this, is we may be alone when we sin. But we are rarely alone when we suffer the consequences of our sin. Our decisions to obey God or to disobey God, I'm telling you, they do affect other people in your lives. They do affect other people in your lives. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's the church, other people are affected by your choices to obey God or not to obey God. Other people are affected by storms of other people, just like you are affected by other people's storms. So this morning, let me ask you a question. What difficult situations are you facing right now in your life? What's a storm that's going on in your life right now? Have you been praying about it? Is that storm there because of some decision that you've made a while back? Or is that storm there because of somebody else's decision in your life? Maybe God is using that situation in your life to get your attention. Maybe God is saying, look, child, stop looking at that storm and start looking at me. The only one that can quiet that storm in your life. Is God getting your attention with the storm that's going on in your life right now? Let's go back to the story. There's a whole flurry of activity going on the ship. I mean, the ship is being buffeted back and forth by the storm. The sailors are crying out to their gods to save them. They're running around throwing the cargo overboard. They are doing all that they can do to save themselves in this desperate situation. But where's Jonah in all of this? Jonah is down below, sleeping. So that tells me something that running from God must be exhausting work. Because Jonah is dead to the world. All this stuff's going on around him, he doesn't even know it. And I don't know about you, but I know I have been accused of sleeping like this sometimes. I sleep so hard sometimes, I can't even hear anything, a bomb going off outside. I don't know if you slept like that, but that's the way that Jonah is sleeping now. He can't even be stirred out of the sleep. That's what's going on physically on this ship. But let me tell you what I see going on spiritually on this ship. I see people who have placed their faith in everything but the true living God. I see sailors praying to whatever deity they chose to believe in, and then there's no response happening. Then I see them change their faith to themselves and they start relying on their own experience of what they've done in the past in storms, and they start throwing the cargo overboard, but nothing is happening. The ship is still threatening to break apart. We might ask ourselves, why are they doing all of these futile tasks? The reason is this. Because the only one on board who truly knows what they need for salvation is asleep. This man of God, this follower of God, this lover of God is spiritually asleep down in the ship. I mean, at that very moment, Jonah is truly no different than all the pagan sailors running around. Jonah's put his faith in the deity of his choosing, of his making. You see, Jonah wants a God that only does what Jonah wants him to do. Jonah has made for himself a God that will only do what Jonah wants him to do, where Jonah wants him to do it, and when Jonah wants him to do it. Jonah has taken the God of Scripture and made him into his own God, of what he wants God to be, what he thinks God should be. Therefore, Jonah has made himself an idol, a false deity, because that truly is not what God is. And then Jonah has also placed his faith in himself, because now Jonah thinks that he has it within himself to run from this false deity that he's created. He knows now he has his own power. He can go and escape this. Jonah is truly spiritually asleep to the true living God of Scripture. Jonah is spiritually asleep to the Creator of the universe. Jonah is spiritually asleep to the Creator of the heavens and the earth. Jonah is spiritually asleep to the Creator of the storm that is now threatening his life and all the lives of the people who board that ship. Now, how many times have we as Christians taken a spiritual nap while the storm raged? How many times, as we as believers in Jesus Christ, have taken a spiritual slumber in the midst of a storm while people were running around needing to hear the good news of how to be saved. It's happening all the time. People who claim to know Jesus Christ are asleep to Him while the world, our ship, is coming apart all around us. Everybody's running around trying to save themselves, but we know exactly what they need to be saved, but we, meaning Christians in general, are asleep spiritually down in the ship because we're too busy running from God. Let me ask you something this morning. Have you been sleeping lately? Maybe you're asleep right now and you're starting to stir. Here's what I want you to know. God has called each and every one of you to a good work. A work that He's prepared for each and every one of you since before the foundations of the world were ever laid. And He's called you to that. Specifically. God is calling you, saying, wake up. Get some coffee in you and get going. Get to your Nineveh. Wherever He is calling you, get there. Whatever He's calling you to do, get there. That's what those storms in your life are meant to call you to and say, hey, God is getting my attention. Well, the truth of the matter is this. Sometimes we don't even recognize those storms in our life, do we? No, those storms just get other people's attention, but not all. But remember what I said earlier about God. God knows us better than we know ourselves, and He knows exactly how to get in touch with us when that time comes. So sometimes those storms are not even meant for us at all. Sometimes those storms are meant for other people so that God can use the other people to reach us. That's what we see in our text this morning. The storm is raging. Everyone on board that ship knows something is going on. There's total chaos. But Jonah can't see it because Jonah's asleep. We don't know how long that storm has been raging, but it's been going on long enough for it to brew into this massive storm. But Jonah's asleep. It's been going on long enough for every sailor to cry out to whatever deity they believe in and get no response, but Jonah's still asleep. It's been going on long enough for these men to run down the stairs into the cargo hold, bring the cargo up and start throwing it overboard, and then determine that this isn't working either. The storm has been going on long enough for the people to get into the point of despair. And in all of this raging and chaos and everything going on, God says now to the pagan sea captain, He says, now's the time. Go wake Jonah up now. Now is the time. Go wake Jonah up. Why would a captain be concerned about one man sleeping below unless God stirred him? There's too many things going on this captain needs to be concerned about. He's losing his ship. But he takes the time to go wake Jonah up because God in all this chaos says, now, go. Go back to verse 6. So the captain came and said to him, what do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish. In the midst of all of this, God sends the captain to challenge Jonah, to hold Jonah accountable and say, what are you doing? He says, arise and call on your God. And I imagine that when Jonah heard those words, his heart sank in his chest. He knew he was in trouble. And here's why I say that. Because here's the captain A man of authority, a man with power on this ship, using the same words, the same verbs that God, who has all power and all authority, used when He sent him to Nineveh. When you look at the original language of the saying, God said, "Arise and call out against that great city." And now here's the sea captain saying, "Arise and call out to your God." Clearly God was working through this pagan sea captain to wake up this man of God, to wake up Jonah. Jonah heard exactly what he needed to hear, exactly when he needed to hear it. Now, how many of us here can testify to that? I know I have many times in my life been going through life and somebody say something and you're like, "Man, I need to hear that. Thanks for telling me." Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need a brother or sister to come along and shake us and say, "Wake up, brother! Can't you see your marriage is falling apart? Wake up, sister! Can't you see you're in financial ruin? Wake up, Christian parents! Can't you see your children are wayward? Wake up! Why are you sleeping in your faith? Wake up!" That's basically what's going on here. There could be no doubt right now, no doubt in Jonah's mind, that God is at work in the captain and in this storm. You see, Jonah's just come to the realization. Right about now, he's thinking, "You know what? God's not forgotten about me. And I dang sure have not outrun God." Right about now, he's starting to realize, I'm still in the hot seat. God still wants me to go to Nineveh? How many of you here this morning are starting to realize that? That all that storm in your life, maybe now you're starting to stir from your slumber and you're starting to realize God's not forgotten about you. He still wants you to go where He's calling you to go and do what He's calling you to do. He wants you in your Nineveh. And throughout this story, throughout these couple of verses, we see nothing but God's grace. His amazing grace on display. God's amazing grace is on display in this difficult situation, in this storm. Because it's through this storm that God's grace is not only waking Jonah up spiritually, but He's waking up every person on that ship. And we know that because by the time you get to the end of chapter 1, those sailors came to know God as the creator of the heaven, as the creator of the sea, as the creator of all dry land. They come to know God as the creator of everything. We see at the end of chapter 1 that they offer sacrifices not to their false idols, but to the true living God. They make vows not to their idols, but to the true living God. We see at the end of the chapter that they are praying not to their idols no more. They're praying to the true living God. No longer are they worshiping their idols. They're worshiping the true living God through all of this. It is God's amazing grace displayed in the storm throughout the story that leads these sailors from a futile faith to a saving faith. It's God's amazing grace that takes the ugliness of Jonah's disobedience and the ugliness of sin and turns it into something so wonderful and so beautiful. You see, God will make His glory known to those sailors. Just like in a little while, He's going to make His glory known to the Ninevites. And here's what I want you to see here. He's using Jonah to make it all happen. You can never outrun God. You can never outrun God. He will use your running and He will use your disobedience. He will use your difficult situations to make His glory known to people that you encounter and to save them. And then He's going to bring you to where He wanted you to be all alone. You're still going to do what He calls you to do. You can never outrun God. You're going to be in the Nineveh one day. The only question is when. The only question is how much you're going to have to suffer before you get there. How long is it going to take you to realize you can't outrun God? But God's there with you the whole time. As I close this morning, as I wrap this up, let me just share a truth with you. We all run from God from time to time. Sometimes God calls us to things that just seem too big for us, too difficult for us, too scary for us. So we decide to disobey instead of obeying God. We decide to run instead of trusting in Him. And I'm telling you, I'm a living testimony of that. For years I've run from doing what I'm doing right now. But you cannot outrun God. For years I tried to run and say, this is too big, it's too difficult, I don't have what it takes, that's not for me. But look where I'm at today. Here's what I want you to know. Sometimes in your running, you can run so far, so fast, for so long, that you become spiritually complacent. You slip into a spiritual slumber and you just stop seeking God altogether. And again, I can tell you, that's what I did. In my running, stop seeking. It happens to everyone. That's what happens whenever you run. Is that you this morning? Are you realizing, are you waking up to the fact that you just don't breathe like you used to breathe? And you just don't pray as much as you used to pray. I just am not living my faith like I used to be living my faith. Perhaps you stopped seeking God. Here's what happens when we run. When we decide to disobey, you know what we do? We get busy with life. We busy ourselves with work. We busy ourselves with making ends meet. We busy ourselves with all the thousands of other things that we shove and cram into all the little nooks and crannies of our life, that we leave ourselves with little time to dig into God's Word. We leave ourselves with little time to read His promises and know more about Him. We get so busy with life that we leave little time to spend in prayer with Him, receiving the power from on high to even live life worthy of our call. We get so busy with life that we leave little time of gathering with other believers outside the church and having a meal or just talking to one another. We get so busy with life sometimes, guess what? We even leave little time to come to church. That's just what happens. And it seems to me that we would rather put ourselves to sleep spiritually than to do what God is calling us to do. And this is unintentional, but it happens. We would rather put ourselves to sleep than to do what God is calling us to do. And what He's calling us to do is be obedient. That's it. Just obey Him. Doesn't sound hard. But if you're here this morning and you've been convicted that you've been running, you know that you're living a life of disobedience because your life lately has been marked with nothing but being busy, this message is for you. If you're here this morning and you're getting convicted because your life has been marked by one storm after another storm after another storm, this message is for you. Listen up, and I'm about to tell you what the sea captain told Jonah. Arise and call on your God. Know this, as a child of God, He will hear you and He will rescue you. If you're suffering a storm this morning, listen up. Open your eyes and see that God's amazing grace is all around you. Is God trying to get your attention? Has He been trying to get your attention? Is it time? Is it time to start heading toward home? Please stand.